The Spanish dollar, or piece of 8, was one of the first truly global currencies in the 16th to 18th centuries. Later, the British pound sterling took the crown, backed by the vast economic and imperial might of the British Empire throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. But today, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. It influences economies from Tokyo to Tehran to all over the world. But how did a piece of paper from a young nation become the backbone of global finance? It started with the founding of the nation itself. In this video, we'll dive into the origins of the US dollar, its rise to dominance, current strength, and what the future might hold. Let's start from the beginning. Before we dive deep into it, please subscribe to our channel to stay tuned. Before the US was born, the colonies used a chaotic mix of British pounds, Spanish dollars, and even Native American wampum for trade. After the American Revolution, with the foundation of the United States as a country, a unified currency for the nation was necessary for the nation's internal and international trade to thrive. On April 2, 1792, the U.S. Congress passed the Coinage Act, establishing the dollar as the official currency. The Coinage Act also established the U.S. Mint to produce, establish, and circulate the coins for the U.S. Gold, silver, and copper were the accepted materials for the coins. The first mint facility was built in Philadelphia, which was the nation's capital at the time. The U.S. dollar, established in 1792, was modeled after the Spanish dollar, or pieces of 8, which was widely used in trade. The act created the U.S. Mint and defined the dollar in terms of silver and gold. A dollar was worth 371.25 grains of pure silver or equivalent gold. Initially, gold to silver value was fixed at a 15-to-1 ratio at the time, and that was justified as per the market value of gold and silver. The dollar faced inflation during the War of 1812 and competition from state-issued currencies. By the 1830s, the U.S. adopted a bimetallic standard, gold and silver. Silver was used mostly in the local trade, and gold was widely used for international trade. But the fixed price the U.S. Mint established for silver and gold currency wasn't the reality for the market price of silver and gold. The ratio of the price of silver and gold was volatile. After 1793, silver prices dropped steadily. Gold was still as precious. People hoarded gold, melted down the gold coins, and exported them for higher prices, making the gold coins out of circulation. So, officially, U.S. held a bimetallic standard, but practically, it became monometallism. Silver became the standard currency in circulation. The issue was addressed by the Coinage Act of 1834. Obviously, a lot of politics went behind it. In the Coinage Act of 1834, they set the gold-to-silver ratio as 16-to-1, which deliberately overvalued gold. But this act solved the situation and brought the gold coins back to circulation. In 1859, massive silver deposits were discovered in the western U.S., including the Comstock lode in Nevada, which drove the market price of silver even further down. The influx of cheap silver coins posed a threat of inflation in the market. By that time, the international market had already adopted a gold standard for currency. England was the first country to adopt the gold standard in 1819. In international trade, gold was a preferred currency, because that provided fixed international rates. Also, people trusted gold currency, because using gold as currency limited government monetary power by tying currency value to gold reserves. Gold played a big part in making the US dollar the global currency it is today. We will see that in detail later in this video. A lot of gold discoveries around that time also assured governments that enough gold would be available to make gold coins for at least the next century. The International Gold Standard emerged in 1871 to make international trade easier for all nations. Ironically, US was the last to accept the gold standard via the Coinage Act of 1873, which demonetized silver and ended the bimetallic monetary standard officially. Obviously, there were a lot of risks as the silver coin was widely used, and the Coinage Act of 1873 faced a good share of opposition. They called it the Crime of 73. This pegged the dollar to gold at $20.67 per ounce, stabilizing it and boosting international trust. The dollar gained traction in global trade as the U.S. industrialized. By the early 20th century, the dollar was a stable domestic currency, but it wasn't yet a global powerhouse. Before World War I, the British pound sterling was the world's reserve currency, backed by the British Empire's global reach. The turning point was World War I. European powers drained their treasuries and went into debt to finance the war. At that critical time, the US emerged as a creditor nation, lending money to allies. It transformed from a debtor to the world's largest lender, with its financial capital New York rivaling London. By the 1920s, the dollar became a competitor to the pound. Another major event was the 1930s Depression. President Roosevelt raised the gold price from $20.67 to $35 to stimulate the economy in 1933. If you are thinking about how the increasing gold price helped the US economy, here's the answer. We mentioned earlier that the US dollar was pegged to gold. Before, $1 meant 1/20.67 ounce of gold. After 1933, $1 meant 1/35th ounce of gold. So raising the gold price means devaluing the dollar. Devaluing currency is a common measure to combat deflation in the economy. It encourages exports by making the prices cheaper in the international market, raises domestic prices to stimulate production, and increases the money supply to boost economic activity. Please feel free to watch my video on inflation versus deflation if you are interested in this topic. I have the link in the description box. Getting back to the topic, World War II further boosted the US economy. America supplied arms to the war and possessed 70% of the world's gold reserves and a booming economy. The true coronation of the US dollar occurred in July 1944, as World War II was nearing its end. Delegates from 44 allied nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a new global financial system to prevent the economic chaos created by two world wars. The resulting Bretton Woods Agreement established two key institutions: the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. More crucially, it created a new monetary framework. The US dollar was designated as the world's primary reserve currency. The dollar was pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. All other participating currencies were pegged to the US dollar at fixed exchange rates. Why the US dollar? The United States held over 2/3 of the world's official gold reserves, as I mentioned earlier, and its industrial infrastructure was untouched by the war, making it the world's dominant economic superpower. The world now had a stable, gold-backed dollar at the center of global trade. The Bretton Woods system worked for a time, but it had a fatal flaw. It required the US to maintain enough gold to back all the dollars held internationally. By the 1960s, due to domestic spending on social programs and the Vietnam War, the US was printing more dollars than it could back with gold. Countries like France began to doubt the promise and started exchanging their dollar reserves for gold, depleting US reserves. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement. The United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. This event, known as the Nixon Shock, effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. The world's currencies were no longer backed by gold but by faith in the governments that issued them, which was the fiat system. Despite this, the dollar didn't collapse for three reasons. 1. The entire global financial system was already built on the US dollar. 2. The US offered the most stable and liquid markets, like treasury bonds, for other countries to park their reserves. 3. A deal with Saudi Arabia ensured oil was priced and traded in US dollars, creating perpetual global demand for dollars. Today, the US dollar's hegemony remains largely unchallenged, though its share is slowly declining. Approximately 59% of all central bank foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars. The euro is a distant second, at around 20%, according to IMF data. Over 40% of global trade invoices are in US dollars, far more than America's share of global trade. By 2024, the US share in global trade was 27.2%, which was also the highest since 2005, as per the World Trade Organization. Nearly 90% of all foreign exchange transactions involve the US dollar on one side. It shows how much foreign exchange is dependent on the US dollar, but still, the dollar's future is not guaranteed. Several challenges loom on the horizon. The most important challenge is nations like Russia and China, seeking to reduce US financial leverage, are actively promoting trade in their own currencies. The rise of the Chinese yuan, backed by China's economic might, is the most frequently cited potential challenger. Also, in this digital era, China's digital yuan, ECNY, is the most advanced central bank digital currency, CBDC, among major economies, designed for both domestic and cross-border use. The US is exploring a digital dollar, but is behind in development, At the same time, the massive and growing U.S. national debt, now over $37 trillion, raises long-term concerns about the dollar's stability and value. On top of that, regional blocs like the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, frequently discuss creating alternative payment systems to bypass the dollar-dominated SWIFT network. However, the dollar's position is deeply entrenched. No other currency or asset currently offers the same combination of liquidity in the form of deep, open capital markets, stability and trust in U.S. institutions and the rule of law, and finally, the entire global system is already built on it. The most likely future is not a sudden collapse of the dollar, but a slow, gradual move toward a multi-currency reserve system, where the dollar shares its role with the euro, yuan, and perhaps a digital asset. The U.S. dollar's journey to becoming the world's reserve currency was forged in the fires of world wars, cemented by international agreement, and sustained by the unparalleled size and stability of the American economy. Its reign, while facing new and significant challenges, is a testament to a system built on trust. A trust that, for now, the world continues to place in the greenback. The story of the dollar is far from over.